Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Race to Power. I am Molly Kampir. Our top focus in this edition, US President Donald Trump has announced a rare Republican convention. The question is, what's going on behind the scenes with the convention expected to take place before the 2026 midterm elections? We decode the developments for you. That's coming up shortly. And we're also focusing on the latest coming in from Nepal. What are things looking like on the ground after the deadly protests? The US president has announced a rare Republican convention, which is expected to take place before the crucial 2026 midterm elections in the country. In a Truth Social post, Donald Trump said, I'm quoting, "The Republicans are going to do a midterm convention in order to show the great things we have done since the presidential election of 2024, time and place to be determined." The Republican Party has historically not held a midterm convention. Traditionally, the Red Camp has hosted a convention every 4 years, which is basically to formally nominate the presidential candidate. However, this time, Democrats also announced a midterm convention earlier, and the decision from both parties signaling the high stakes that lie ahead as far as the midterm elections are concerned, with narrow margins on the line for both sides. For Trump and his administration, meanwhile, the goal basically will be to keep hold of the Republican majority in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. And Democrats, meanwhile, will look to flip the narrow margin in the House in their favor and break the Republican Party's trifecta in a way. In fact, the announcement of the midterm conventions also coming at a significant time as far as the political discourse is concerned. Also, the widening divide in the United States, from executive orders to policy overhaul under the Trump administration, the conversation over the last few days has shifted to political violence. US voters are increasingly concerned about the violence after Charlie Kirk was murdered at a university event. And a Reuters Ipsos poll showing roughly 2 out of 3 Americans believe harsh political rhetoric is fueling violence in the country. While the poll suggests that rising political rhetoric and violence may be directly proportional, the assassination of Charlie Kirk has further deepened the divide between the Democrats and the Republicans. The 3-day poll, which closed on Sunday, surveyed the adults from across the United States. In fact, it also reveals that Americans are increasingly concerned about political violence and the deepening partisan divisions in the country. Roughly 63% of the respondents to the Reuters Ipsos poll said the way Americans talk about political issues does a lot to encourage violence. Another 31% saying the country's approach to political discourse contributes a little to political violence, while the remaining respondents either saw no impact or did not answer the question. And when asked just how tolerant Americans are of opposing viewpoints compared to 20 years ago, 79% said Americans have become less tolerant to differing views over the past 2 decades. Only 10% believe there has been little or no change as compared to 20 years ago. All right, we will be decoding for you what that poll has told us, and in fact, the key takeaways from the respondents' answers, and also the conventions that are set to take place and what the two sides are looking like. And with us on the broadcast this minute is Professor Andrew Latham, who is a distinguished scholar of international relations, strategic studies and political economy, with us from Minnesota, United States. Thanks very much for being here. Let me begin by asking you for your assessment of what's playing out. Of course, those conventions are extremely crucial ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. But first, your reaction to those poll results that we just brought to our viewers and the way in which the rhetoric and the conversations around political violence actually impact the situation on the ground.
Thanks for having me. The polling data doesn't actually surprise me at all. I think anybody who lives in this country and spends 5 minutes reading across different news outlets or watching different news outlets knows that we've seen heightened polarization. And not just polarization, but demonization of the other as well. So that this Charlie Kirk assassination/murder was instructive. I don't know what motivated the killer. I don't think anybody's quite sure about that yet. That's not the political issue. The political issue is how Democrats and Republicans reacted, how the right and left reacted. The left pointed fingers and said, he's an ultra-fascist. The assassin is an ultra-fascist. He's far right, blah, blah, blah. And the conservative/Republican center right said, no. He's clearly motivated by far left progressive ideology. And so no willingness, instinctive willingness to reflect, to wait, to see what the facts actually said. Both sides backed quickly into their hardened silos and accused the assassin of being a member of the other camp. So the polling data actually verifies what I think most people watching American political life would understand. Yeah, so we can take it from there.
Right. The announcement of this convention on part of the US president and just how rare this, of course, is. But at the same time, what are the issues, according to you, that are top of the mind as far as the US voter is concerned right now, apart from the Charlie Kirk and the gun violence issue?
Yes, well, I think there's partly a bit of an arms race going on here in the sense that once the Democrats decided they were going to have a convention, the Republicans obviously had to have one as well. The margins are tight. Republican polling data suggests that the Republicans aren't doing terribly well, but neither are the Democrats. And both, I think, are a little bit desperate in terms of bumping those numbers up, and they see these conventions as a means of doing that. For the Democrats pointing to the Republicans in the House and the Senate and the White House and saying, look how bad things are, we can do better. And the Republicans saying, well, things are actually getting better. If it weren't for those obstructionists on the Democrat side, we might actually make a lot more progress. The big issues, I think, quite apart from political violence, which is right now a big issue, but the underlying issue really is the economy. Which is not doing terribly well, despite the way that President Trump likes to spin it. The numbers aren't catastrophic or disastrous, but neither are they fantastic, as President Trump might put it. Whether it's unemployment, underemployment, cost of living, things of that nature. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people are experiencing this moment as an economic downturn. And they're hearing lots of talk about recession and stagflation and all kinds of other things that might be just around the corner. So I think the economy and violence, political violence, polarization are going to be the two big issues. And even if the Charlie Kirk assassination hadn't happened, I think polarization and gun violence still would have been on the agenda, because there have been multiple instances of apparently politically motivated violence in this country in the last few years. So it's a big issue.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us with your perspectives. And we're shifting focus now to Nepal. The country is ushering in a new era in a way after the deadly protests. But the scars remain. The country is observing a day of mourning for people who were killed during that uprising. Heartbreaking images have been coming in from the capital Kathmandu, showing relatives holding funerals for their loved ones. At the Pashupatinath temple, Distraught mothers were seen crying uncontrollably as their children's bodies were brought out of the mortuary and taken for the last rites. And the relatives bid final farewell to their loved ones. Funeral processions of the victims being held with each body covered in the country's national flag. Onlookers also paid their last respects as the pyres were seen in those images. The interim government has announced a national day of mourning on the 17th of September, and the head of the interim government declared the victims martyrs, promising state honors at their cremations, the national flags flying at half-mast across Nepal. Protests started on September 8 after a short-lived ban on social media, but were later snowballed as a result of the anger over corruption-related issues, also the long-standing economic woes. At least 19 people were killed in a crackdown on the first day, triggering outpouring of rage across the nation, with government offices, hotels, other buildings set on fire. Mexico witnessed a symbolic yet landmark shift at the helm of its leadership, with the first woman president in the country leading a commemoration ceremony and military parade marking 250 years of Mexico's independence. Jail is not the last of the problems for the former Brazilian president, Bolsonaro. He has been fined $188,000 in a case related to racist remarks that he made while in office, allegedly. The incident dates back to 2021. During an interaction with a black supporter, Bolsonaro said reportedly his hair was a breeding ground for cockroaches. Counsel of the former president has said there was no intention of racial offense, but the court argued that the comment does not come under the ambit of free speech, but amounted to recreational racism, quote unquote. Bolsonaro has been sentenced to a jail term for over 27 years in a coup case. The court delivered its verdict against him for one, and Bolsonaro and his close associates were convicted of planning a coup after the 2022 election loss against the president, Lula da Silva. And the former president is also fighting several health complications. He is currently admitted in the hospital. According to a statement released by his son, Bolsonaro was experiencing intense vomiting, dizziness, and extremely low blood pressure. This comes just days after a series of medical tests and surgical procedures, reportedly. Ecuador has declared a national emergency. The president has said the move aims to address the paralysis that has disrupted public order, causing a situation of overt violence over fuel subsidy cuts. The rising cost of fuel has angered the people on the ground. Widespread protests, clashes have taken place in the capital, where the student-led march turned violent. In fact, the protesters tore down fences and clashed with the police at the city centre, that is near the government palace. In response, the police fired tear gas and stun grenades to disperse the crowd.
I reject all the measures the government is imposing on the Ecuadorian people, including the diesel price hike. Fuel prices have already gone up, and the VAT has been raised to address the issue of insecurity, and the number of deaths continues to rise, and the number of criminal groups continue to multiply.
Aumentan y los grupos se multiplican.
The state of emergency affects the right to free movement, work, and the exercise of economic activities. It also restricts the right to assembly and grants control of public order by the police and the armed forces. So far, the emergency has been imposed in 6 provinces across Ecuador. Anti-government protests taking place at regular intervals. Last week, the scenes on the streets were similar. Protesters took to the streets against the economic policy that has led to thousands of layoffs reportedly, and the leader also aims to cut down the salaries of the government employees. Slovakia's Prime Minister is facing the heat. Thousands of people poured into the streets across the country in what is said to be a big nationwide protest against the leader. Rallies were held in 16 cities, including the capital. The demonstrators are angry over the economic policies and the leader's close ties with Moscow.
Začínali protesty proti novele trestného zákona.
For me, it is important that Slovakia belongs to Europe and the European space is united. We, as Slovakia, because we deviate from that opinion held by Europe, it is not pleasant to me.
The trigger was the latest foreign trip to China, where the leader met the Russian president. This was his 3rd meeting with the Russian president since the invasion of Ukraine. On the home front, the new austerity package has stirred outrage. The measures include higher insurance payments, tax increases for top earners, a rise in value-added tax on food, and even a possible cut in national holidays. The government says the measures aim to solve a widening deficit. The protests were organized by 4 opposition groups. In fact, the leader won last year's election with a pro-Russia, anti-America platform. Opposition leaders argue that he is leading Slovakia down the same path as Hungary under the Prime Minister Viktor Orban. On to South Africa now, where the much-anticipated Madlanka Commission of Inquiry has started. The President Ramaphosa established the inquiry after the police commissioner claimed criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the country's criminal justice system. The police commissioner implicated top police officials and government ministers in organized crime, reportedly. And the commission is led by the former acting Deputy Chief Justice. The police commissioner will be taking the stand as the commission's first witness and is expected to testify into early next week. His testimony is expected to detail allegations of political interference. The commission's budget stands at 147.9 million South African rand, with hopes of uncovering long-buried corruption scandals within the police service across the 2025 and 2026 financial years. Many political parties and civil society leaders have questioned whether this money will be spent well, or will it just be another costly affair with no serious consequences. The Commission will not be able to take any action against anyone. Instead, it will be making findings and recommendations for criminal prosecutions, disciplinary action, and institutional reform. After the commission completes its work, a final report will be submitted to Ramaphosa. Interim reports expected after 3 and 6 months, respectively. The military junta in Guinea is preparing to hold a referendum on a draft constitution that has the country divided. 6.7 million Guineans are eligible to cast votes. In fact, supporters and members of the junta were seen campaigning in the country ahead of the crucial vote that will be held on Sunday. The draft constitution is expected to pave the way for the elections, but a provision will also allow Guinea's junta leader to contest the elections.
The new constitution bill is not just a legal document. It is a tool for renewal and a powerful instrument for building a more just, more equitable, and more democratic Guinea. We young people need to understand the importance of this constitution and especially make it a lever to improve our daily lives.
The military junta assumed power in 2021 after overthrowing then-President Alpha Condé. 4 years later, the draft constitution raises hopes for an election again. But the opposition has slammed the provision to allow the military junta to contest. Critics saying that junta leaders have gone back on their promise of returning to a civil administration. Since 2021, several leaders and activists have either been detained or exiled from the country. Opposition parties also remain suspended and protests are banned. Chad's National Assembly has endorsed constitutional changes. These changes would extend the presidential term from 5 to 7 years and will allow the president to serve unlimited terms. The country's president, who came to power following his father's assassination in 2021, is consolidating his rule after a disputed 2024 election and subsequent parliamentary victory. The National Assembly approved the changes on Monday by a vote of 171 in support. 1 abstention, 0 against. The revisions overwhelmingly passed by the Assembly now await a Senate vote, with experts anticipating little resistance and a further tightening of the current regime's grip on power. The Senate will vote on October 13, and then the President will be signing the constitutional changes into law.
Qui est articulé en 12 chantiers, réorganisés en 100 actions concrètes. Choisissez-moi le 6 mai.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. We're taking a very short break. Stay with us.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000